So excited to be here to talk about sports and fitness freelancing, or to learn about it in my case. I am Catherine Reynolds Lewis. I'm the founder of the Institute for Independent Journalists. We want to encourage anyone who would like closed captioning to click on the closed caption button at the bottom of the screen to enable that. We are recording the call, and the recording will be sent afterwards, so keep an eye out for that in Tuesday's newsletter. We are always happy to have flattering screenshots or words of wisdom shared on social media, and feel free to use the hashtag #TheIIJ. And as always, please take shared responsibility for impact when you're chatting in the chat, because we are all coming into this space from different places, and it can sometimes feel jarring if you're struggling and someone else is poo-pooing a rate that you would really love. So bear that in mind, that we're all coming in from a different place, and we want to center marginalized voices and folks who don't always have opportunities to connect with gatekeepers around journalism and freelancing. Everyone is welcome, and please share the space. I'm Catherine Reynolds Lewis. I'm the founder of the Institute for Independent Journalists, and I'm thrilled to welcome everyone to our webinar on sports and fitness freelancing, which will be ably moderated by Christine Yu, an award-winning journalist whose work focuses on sports, science, and health. Her writing has appeared in Outside, The Washington Post, Runner's World, and other publications, and she has a book that I highly recommend picking up to Speed, the groundbreaking science of women athletes, which highlights the underrepresentation of women in sports science research and how we can build a better, more inclusive system of science and sports to help women athletes excel at every stage of life. She lives in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm just thrilled to introduce Christine Yu. Thanks so much for moderating.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm so honored to be here with you all and to be here with these amazing editors. Just a quick note, we did have Gregory Lee, who's the senior editor at Front Office Sports. He unfortunately had to cancel at the last minute. There's apparently a big football game going on this weekend, so he had to take care of a couple of things with that. But hopefully we will record a Q&A with Gregory separately, that will be made available. Sports is such a great topic to talk about, and I think oftentimes we think of just the things that happen on the field or on the track, but sports is really just a way to tell more human stories. So I'm excited to be able to talk with Alisa and Monique about how we can expand these stories and share them, because they are so important. So just to introduce our amazing panel here. So Alisa Hrustic, I totally butchered your last name, joined Self in September 2021 as health director before eventually becoming executive editor. She helped lead the launch of Conditionally, Self's first health conditions vertical. She currently manages the brand's day-to-day content, spanning general health, wellness, food, and fitness, and oversees editorial packages and digital covers. She's previously held positions at national publications like Women's Health, Men's Health, and Prevention, where she contributed to both print and digital content. She currently lives in Brooklyn, but is a Midwesterner at heart and is especially into birding right now. Alisa is also an amazing editor. I've had the opportunity to work with her in the past, and if you do have the opportunity to pitch her, I highly recommend it. Monique LeBrun is the Associate Health and Fitness Editor at Runner's World and Bicycling Magazine. She has 5 years of experience in the media industry. Monique received her master's degree in journalism from Columbia University in 2019, and her bachelor's degree in communications from Penn State University in 2016. With a focus on fitness and nutrition, Monique enjoys writing and editing content to help educate and advise runners and cyclists so they can reach their full potential. She's previously worked for 1010 Wins, ABC's 7 on Your Side, and the New York Times Upfront magazine. So welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being here. Just want to jump right into it, right? Kind of being respectful of everyone's time. I would love for each of you to share what you oversee for your media outlets, kind of describe the publication or section that you lead, and what kind of stories, multimedia, or more that you accept from independent journalists. How much freelance work do you take relative to in-house?
Sure, I can jump in here. Hi, thank you, Christine, for that very gracious introduction. I'm so happy to be here and speaking with you all on such an amazing topic. So as Christine mentioned, I'm the executive editor at Self, which is a very broad title right now. I currently oversee just our day-to-day content, and that spans from news to features to SEO. All of that runs the gamut. I manage our 3 editorial directors, and though they span topics like health, food and fitness, as well as wellness, which kind of encompasses softer mental health, beauty. So cross verticals, I have eyes on everything. I am the biggest point of contact for getting content published on our site right now. So whether our staff is pitching daily news, a freelancer is pitching daily news, I have eyes on it before it's approved. Same with our monthly vertical lineups. I look at all pitches that come through my directors. So I have final eyes on everything before it's approved and ready to go. And yeah, right now I am basically responsible for making sure content gets produced on our site in a timely and efficient way, in a way that fits the self-brand voice. I also oversee greater editorial packages, features, digital covers, which Christine and I got to work on together, which is so great. And currently, I would say that when it comes to in-house versus freelance, I would say the divide is about 60-40, so about 60 in-house, and that encompasses our staff writers, our directors, and about 40% that we freelance out. And that, again, spans across all types of content right now.
Can I just ask you a quick follow-up question?
Sure.
I know Self has a very unique brand voice.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe that? Like, how would you describe that to folks?
Oh, that's a great question. It's something that I think is always a work in progress, but we really, really value bodily autonomy, empathy, warmth. We are very generous of the reader. We assume the best of the reader. We assume our reader is very in the know and intelligent. But we like to talk about health and fitness and wellness in a way that is very inclusive, that is, not assuming anything of the reader, really, besides that they want to live a little bit better. So I think we really try to approach everything with this friendly, conversational, warm, empathetic tone that we're really proud of. We're not perfect. Of course, we're always learning about how to best speak to diverse audiences, how we can be more encompassing, but it's something that we really, really try to keep top of mind. Even if we're saying see a doctor, adding something like if you can, or if one is available to you, I think goes a long way in assuming that people won't always have the same level of care, for example. So we just really try to approach everything with empathy in mind.
That's great. And Monique, what about you? Tell us a little bit about Runner's World and bicycling, the types of stories that you oversee and that you're looking for.
Yeah, so I am the Associate Health and Fitness Editor for both the Runner's World and Bicycling magazines, which are 2 brands underneath the Hearst Umbrellas Enthusiast Group. And so basically for Runner's World, as it is in the title of the magazine, we are striving to provide the best information and the newest information to runners in regards to training, gear, nutrition, races, and news in that area. Personally, I am on the service team, so I cover health and fitness, and in a way that services the reader, the runner. And so my beat for Runner's World would be training plans, methods, and advice. So basically covering content that helps runners train more effectively, but also related to in terms of advice, things that can be helpful, which I'll get into more as we go on throughout the webinar. But particularly something that I did recently when we were in marathon season, I oversaw some pitches related to like how to calm race day nerves and I actually worked with a freelancer on how to race with a pacer on race day. So things like that. And then also one of my favorite things to work on is our playlist. I oversee that. It's a small thing that has picked up in steam because a lot of us runners, well, some runners, not a lot, but some runners like to listen to music. Some runners like mindfulness. I guess it depends on who you're talking to, but that's what I oversee on Runner's World. And then bicycling, it's a bit the same, focusing on cyclists though, so like how they train, how to get them to be more effective. And for both brands, I do a lot of SEO updates and optimizing some of our evergreen stories. And then I think that's pretty much, oh, also syndications, overseeing syndications, anything from Hearst brands that I feel might be related to our readers. I'm able to oversee pulling those over and like correcting it to be in our voice and stuff like that. So that's it.
Do you have a sense of the breakdown between how much you take from freelancers versus how much you work in-house on your stories?
Yeah, I feel like it is pretty much 50-50. I feel like we get a lot of pitches. Sometimes we don't always go with the pitches, but we do assign some of the pitches that come out of our um pitch meetings to freelancers. So that kind of keeps it balanced.
That's great. And then, so talking about pitches, I guess, Monique, we can keep talking with you. What is the ideal pitch for your publication? And, when you're talking about that, can you discuss like the range of story lengths or projects that you're typically seeking? And what's the best way to get in touch with you or others on your team?
Yeah, so the best way to get in touch would be email. And the ideal pitch really services the reader. So think about runners or cyclists and what it is that they may need help with. Again, I am working mostly in the service division. So we really like to gravitate towards pitches that pose and solve a problem, like pose a question and solve the question. And so I feel like in my opinion, with some of the freelancers that I've worked with, I'm fairly new, so I feel like my colleagues may have a different answer, but I feel like the ideal pitch requires some pre-recording, which in the past, I feel like some of the freelancers that I've worked with, they won't start reporting until it's been assigned. And I think that it's important to do some background research and at least have a couple of sources on deck that you can say, like, I know these people will speak to this topic with me, because it just really allows us on the back end to see what the full picture is versus assigning, like you saying like a one-liner, this is my story idea. And then we kind of filter through the process of figuring out what the story is going to look like after it's been assigned. I feel like that makes it harder to actually hit your deadlines and like get everything in the timely fashion that we would like. So I think an ideal pitch will definitely focus on what it is that the runner needs, whether it be based on nutrition, how to improve their slow pace, their easy, slow run pace, or, how sleep plays into their overall recovery process. You got to do a little bit of like a little bit of work before you just pitch it.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's super helpful. And Alisa, what about for you? What's an ideal pitch for self?
Oh my gosh, I could talk about this forever. I will try not to drone on too long, but I think one thing to keep in mind with self is that, unlike Runner's World, which has a very specific audience, is an audience of runners, incredible enthusiast publication, of course. We are not a sports specific or fitness specific publication. Like I mentioned, we have many other verticals, and really our audience is a wellness-minded individual who may have an interest in fitness or sports, and we're really like in that vertical. We are really talking to someone who is maybe a bit of a beginner. Maybe they have some of the basics, but they want to know how to like improve their squat, or they're tapped into what's going on in the fitness world, but they may not know the nitty-gritty details of any one particular athlete, for example. So to me, the ideal pitch, and I'll talk about like sports and fitness a little bit separately, because I do think I do tend to view them separately for our site, is in the sports realm. Like if we're talking about an athlete, I'm really gravitated towards a pitch that can kind of speak to the athlete in a way that appeals to a broader audience, that can have that athlete connect to the world in a way that goes beyond just their sport. Sports are a great way into larger conversations that affect us day to day, whether it's mental health, whether it's a health condition, equity, things like that. And I think I'm really gravitated towards themes around athletes in that way. When it comes to fitness, we do a lot in-house and let me preface this by saying we have a food and fitness director who's incredible, and she guides this coverage, and I work very closely with her on it. But we shoot all of our exercise listicles in-house. For example, we do a big photo shoot every year, and we have what we call everyday athletes to make sure that like our gifts are very representative of the world we live in. She has a firm handle on like exercise listicles or workout specific content. So what we're really looking for in a pitch from a freelancer is, what unique angle can you bring to us that goes beyond a basic workout listicle or beyond a basic SEO explainer? Because we're really strategizing around those ideas on our team to begin with. And of course, we assign some of that out. But I think to stand out when you're, cold emailing an editor is, why are you the person to write this story to start? Like, why, like what kind of, do you have a personal experience that you can draw on to speak to a larger conversation happening in the fitness space? Or, do you specialize in a certain type of reporting and have access to certain athletes that, maybe other freelancers don't? I want to see like that you have something unique to bring to a particular story, because I think that will really help sell me on like you being the writer for it. And then I think, to Monique's point, is just being very focused in your pitch and having a clear idea. I think having a headline is actually really big for me. I think a lot of freelancers actually miss this, is they have an idea, but they don't have the frame for it yet. And I think a headline that's really compelling goes a long way. Like if I see pitch and like an interesting headline that I would want to read, that captures my attention. So it goes back to like maybe doing some of that pre-reporting and having the general scope and angle in mind, so you have what you need in order to craft a compelling frame for the story. And I think for fitness in particular, like if you are someone who specializes in something like SEO and maybe you haven't broken into being like a regular contributor, I think trying to go one step further than like a basic SEO story and trying to find a secondary angle that maybe we haven't thought of yet really shows me that you're really into this, you're good at this, like you know what an SEO story is, but you also know that like SEO can be fun and interesting, and like sometimes you need more brains in the room to come up with new ideas. So an example of this could be like, I don't really want to see a pitch of like how to do a perfect squat in my inbox, because like that's something that we're going to do in-house. But I think if you could bring something like, should your knees ever go past your toes when you squat, like something that's just like very hyper specific and like maybe we haven't thought of yet. I think that's an interesting route to take if you are more specialized in something like general explainers or SEO.
Thank you. Those are great answers. And I love the tip around coming up with the headline. Like, as much as I hate writing headlines or brainstorming headlines,
We do too. They're very hard.
but it is a great like tool to be able to really just hone in on what is the point of your story, right? Like, what is the hook? What is it that I'm really trying to get across here? The other thing I wanted to ask was, this is a big year in sports with the Olympics coming up, and I'm both curious in terms of how both of your publications are handling coverage around that. Like, if you are open to pitches from freelancers, what that timing might look like, right? Since it is pegged to a specific date and time.
I can go. So for us, being Runner's World, we are very interested in the Olympics. And we've even started receiving like pitches for different angles. So as soon as possible, if you feel like you have a unique angle, that is tied into the Olympics and that can like service our runners, our readers, I say pitch it as soon as possible, I think, and to the point where like it's about like if you have access, like if you have access to a particular athlete, then yeah, mention that, put that at the forefront because oftentimes when it comes to like big race events, access when it's particular to an athlete, whether you're trying to showcase their strength training routine or how they overcome a specific barrier or issue when it comes to training a certain way or something like that. Like we need to know if you have that access or if you need us to get you that access because runners at this point in time are very busy and they don't really want to they don't really, not that they don't want to, they don't have the time to sit and do an interview. So if you already have that access up front, we would like to know that. Also, in terms of what things that we would possibly like to cover, because I'm service, it's again, those interesting little bits that people wouldn't, like the typical non-runner wouldn't think about. So like, for example, I just it's hard to like say what stories we're gonna go with because I don't want to like stomp on any toes before we publish anything. But like if you like for example, if you look at our previous coverage of like how we've covered races, and we've done things in the past in terms of like marathon training. I'll bring up again like I did in the past a story on how pro runners are dealing with like race day jitters. So something like that, like how pros are dealing with race day jitters, or maybe I mean the trials just passed, but I know that we were looking for different runners, runners that you ordinary runners in the marathon trials and like how they got to that journey. We were looking at things like that. So coming up for the summer, we're probably, if there's a unique way that somebody can still participate in the Olympic events without like actually um, being one of the Olympians, then we'd be interested in that. Because I think that like there is either a 5K or some type of race that's going on that's not actually a part of the Olympics, but will be going on in Paris. So we might like look at small things like that.
Oh, that's great. Alisa, what about for you?
Oh my gosh, we've been talking about the Olympics a lot on my team. We're very excited. We actually just started a conversation about putting together a preliminary coverage plan. And so that will involve on our end some of the longer lead stories, whether it's like explaining a certain event or breaking down, how something works, that we will mostly be handling in-house or assigning out to regular contributors. I think where we will be looking to freelancers for the Olympics is, well, one, if you're planning on being there, we'd love to know. So if you're already going to go, you're going and you're going to be pitching a lot, like definitely reach out directly. I'm happy to share my email and our fitness director's email, of course. But let us know you'll be there because we're looking for people who are going to be on standby, watching closely. Again, access is huge. But even if you're not, I think what we'll really lean on freelancers for is closer to the event, more of that in the moment coverage. We are definitely going to be focusing on women athletes specifically. The big, of course, gymnastics is always going to be a huge one. And that's one that's like a sport that our audience has like had a lot of response to. So I think we're going to be looking more for coverage that goes beyond just like, this is what happened. Because again, we're not a sport specific publication. Like we want to be able to be additive in a way that goes beyond just the sport. So if you're noticing a trend, even in say like post event interviews where all of the athletes are talking about their mental health some way, that's a self story in many ways. And if you can bring some kind of commentary to that, like this is why everyone is talking about their mental health. Like this is why these athletes are talking about their mental health at the Olympics. Or if they're, if someone gets injured and we have a chance to come in and explain how that type of injury happens, or what, like how this might affect the coming days, or like if we can break down a moment beyond recapping it, like bring in an expert, again, like being additive, I think is going to be really crucial for our coverage, because it's just hard for us to compete with sports specific publications who are like, they're on it all day, and ours is more just to like highlight this incredible event, these incredible athletes. So that is something that I would keep in mind, is that like we're not going to be doing recaps. We're not going to be like, and again, if we do decide to like recap an especially incredible moment just because it's like it's everywhere and everyone's talking about it, like that's something that we would likely handle in-house. Again, we're looking for like commentary. We're looking for people who have really strong personal perspectives, something that they can bring their unique voice to. Something that like is going to maybe build on the buzz of a particular moment or notice a trend that's going on. And yeah, that's something that again we'll just be looking for more as the event is happening. And so with that in mind, like be prepared to turn things around quickly. Like if you want to pitch something, like we want to be able to publish our story when everyone is talking about a certain moment, or like soon after an event happens. So I would just be prepared that if you want to pitch around something that's like very quick, that you're ready to do it in a way that is, we might give you a day or two to turn it around, rather than like our typical evergreen stuff where we allow weeks for publication.
Thank you both. That's super helpful, just to get a better sense of timing and what you all are looking for. And I know this is a big question that's on most freelancers' mind. What are your pay rates? What's the range of rates, and the terms of that, right? Like, are you paying upon submission, acceptance, or publication? Do you have kill fees? And can those rates be negotiated? We'll get into a little bit more of the contract nitty-gritty next, but let's start with pay.
Yeah, so I can go. For pay, as much as I want to give a concrete number, it really depends on the writer. So I can say that we do pay within 30 days of publication. And then we also pay a kill fee, but I don't have the exact amounts. But yeah, as far as how much you get paid, it really, really depends on the writer. So I would say, and as we get into it more, I will say more about like how you can advocate for yourself, but you really just have to kind of advocate for yourself to get paid the price that you deserve. Because a lot of contract stuff kind of just goes to the lawyers of Hearst, and like they go back and forth that way. So unfortunately, I can't give a concrete number.
And when you say it depends on the writer, do you mean by, based on that writer's experience, like how many years that they've been writing, the types of clips that they have, or also in terms of like the scope of the story?
The scope of the story and the writer's experience. Definitely the scope of the story, because sometimes we'll have stories that are just, quick 300 words. Other stories will be more long form, up to like 1,200 words. And so the longer, lengthier stories will pay more for those, obviously, but the shorter stories, we won't pay as much depending on like what it is, what you have to do. Like I said earlier, we do a playlist, a monthly playlist, every month. And so I work with one freelancer on that, and it's a quick hit. It's 300 words, so it's on the lower end. But when we had him reach out to an athlete to do an interview, the pay went up. So it really depends on the story.
Great. And Alisa?
Sure. So to Monique's point, we also have a similar structure where it's going to depend, but I can offer some general numbers for new writers, just because I assume a lot of people that are listening are likely going to be new to the brand. So I've been talking a lot about those quick newsy type write-ups. Generally, for new writers at our brand, if it is a news, quick hit, trending type of story with maybe one source and about 1,000 words or less, typically we start around 450 for that type of story. In terms, we typically look at word count and the amount of reporting that's required of any one story. So if we go into the service story type spectrum where, you're answering a question, you're doing something that's more explanatory, about 1,400 words would be roughly starting around $600 for the assignment. And then if you go up to like 1,800, we're getting into like the $700 and up range. We don't typically freelance out like aggregated stories. So those, again, we wouldn't pay for those we handle in-house. And then it's really just case by case from there. Again, those are very general numbers. Each director on my team has an individual budget. So it's really up to them. They have their marching orders in terms of like how much content they need to produce in a month. And it's really up to them to decide like how much they would like to keep in-house and how much they would like to freelance out. And like rates may vary slightly depending on, their budget month to month. And that's really within their scope to figure out. I would say anything like features, big brand moments, things like that. We, of course, we typically like have built up relationships with people. So we're happy to pay on the higher end of the spectrum for really robust features and, articles that take weeks to months. Like we absolutely want to be able to pay 1,000 and up for those. But yeah, I think it's just going to depend. And I do think like you can absolutely advocate for yourself again, and I think the rates that I mentioned are starting. So if you haven't worked with anyone on my team, it will likely be set around that price. But if you've built a relationship with an editor, myself, I start to depend on you. I start to like very much look forward to seeing your name in my inbox, and like I want to keep you around. Again, like the budgets are flexible month to month, and it's under any one editor's purview on like how they want to maintain a relationship with a freelancer. So I think being friendly, being open to like edits and feedback, and like wanting to make sure that the story is what the brand needs goes a really long way. And I think definitely will be helpful to a freelancer in like creating a relationship where they can more comfortably just like advocate for themselves and be like, hey, we have a good thing going. I was wondering, now that I've done this amount of work, can we take another look at my pay rate? Like, I think that's a great way to approach it. And it's something that we're open to. And yeah, I encourage it. I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's a lot of work to produce these stories. So it's definitely something to keep in mind in terms of the scope of your story. If there's more work, there's likely more pay behind it.
Yeah, definitely. And so kind of getting a little bit more nitty-gritty into the contracts, right? There are 3 issues that most freelancers really care about. So one is in terms of copyright. What are the licensing terms? Is this a work for hire contract? 2 is the is the derivative rights, right? Like, does the freelancer retain any, say, to write a book or to develop a film based on this article? And the third piece are really around indemnity, right? Like, are you indemnifying the publication from lawsuits? What are your contract terms on these three different issues? Alisa, do you want to start?
Sure. I forgot, before I jump into that, I did forget to answer the question about kill fees before.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I just wanted to clarify, we do have a 25% kill fee for most of our articles. I am actually, to answer this question, I am not going to pretend like I am understanding of our contract info. We have a director of editorial operations who is wonderful and is like the key point person in onboarding all of our freelancers and making sure that they have a contract that they feel good about. So I sent these exact questions to him. So I'm going to read it verbatim to make sure that I don't lead anyone astray. So I will say that we consider freelance work as work for hire. Condé Nast, which is where Self falls under the Condé Nast entity, also holds all derivative rights. There is no language in our contract that says a freelancer must indemnify the brand from lawsuits. However, our contract says that the contributor must cooperate with the company and also respond to and or defend against if any legal action is taken against the company because of an article that they wrote.
Great. And Monique, what about for Hearst?
Again, it definitely depends on the person in their contract, but I can say that our legal team is willing to work with the writer to outline specific terms that apply to them if they have any issues with our general contract. As far as like copyright and licensing terms, again, it varies because, and I say that because there are certain articles that we are able to syndicate and certain things that we're not able to syndicate, and it really does vary depending on the person's contract. And so with being able to write a book or like developing a film from something that you have produced for us, again, it could be a possibility, but you have to just make sure that you get those terms outlined in your individual contract. Unfortunately, because Runner's World and bicycling are part of hers, it's a bigger and more broader issue that kind of like, or contract that kind of like spans across multiple brands, but you can definitely, if there is possibility for you to advocate for yourself and get certain things for you in your contract.
Yeah, and I would just definitely reiterate that, like, it never hurts to ask, you know, if
Totally.
you have a different contract available or if there are specific terms that you're worried about, to always ask. I mean, they can say no, but at least you asked. And so I wanted to ask you two both, like, if you could give us an example or two of a freelance pitch or story idea that really worked well for you, like one that someone you've never worked with before, right? It's kind of pitching you cold. And why do you think that pitch worked? Like, why did it resonate for you or for your publication? I don't know who wants to start with that one.
I can jump in here. I actually asked Krista Scoba, she's our food and fitness director, this exact question because she's kind of the first point of contact for most fitness and sports pitches before they funnel up to me. So I was actually very curious to hear her thoughts on this. And we had a really great conversation about it. One that she pointed out to me directly was, this is a story that we ended up publishing on our site. I believe she had worked with this writer before, but not like regularly or like on a weekly or monthly basis or anything like that. And the pitch had it had everything kind of that I mentioned before, right? So it had a conversational and warm, friendly headline that sounded like you could live on self. And I will say that headline that she pitched was, "Hold on, is walking as a workout cool again?" And the headline that we did end up changing it, the one that ended up on our site, is "How the Humble Walk Became a Huge Workout Trend." And this pitch really stood out to her because it fed all those buckets that we were looking for. The pitch itself was 2 paragraphs. It was written in a way that we could see her voice come through as a writer. She directly called out, you know, the timely hook of it all, walking becoming like this big trend on social media, even though, you know, it's walking. She included research about, you know, why walking is beneficial, why it's there's recent research on why we should still be paying attention to it as like a legit workout. And then she also topped off with like how the fitness industry is also kind of paying attention to people seeing walking as this cool thing again. So she mentioned like certain big brands that were kind of even changing the way that they, you know, like certain products that they had or whatever to kind of cater to this larger trend. And I don't know, it just felt like a very self story because it goes back to, you know, our reader being kind of a beginner, maybe like not as tapped in. It's so accessible. Everyone can go on a walk. And it was fun to approach it through the lens of like, oh, is this thing cool again? Like, is this something that we should all be paying attention to? And just a great story that like maybe like we weren't really talking about amongst ourselves. It wasn't too dry. Like there was like some personality behind her pitch, and it felt like the perfect fitnessy / commentary type of story that we'd want on our site.
That's great. I love that.
For me, one pitch that worked well for I had to ask one of my deputy editor, Mallory, because I tend to work with pitches that I come up with and like assigning them out to other writers, but I'm always open to working with freelancers and getting freelancers to pitch to me. I'm always trying to get somebody to get a story that I can see all the way to publication. But the story that worked well was The Surprising Symptoms of Anxiety in Runners, pitched by Kelsey Kloss. And basically her story discussed all the different ways that runners may experience anxiety. So, for example, overtraining, hyperfocusing on nutrition and hydration, obsessing with your fitness track, like tracking your progress, comparing yourself to others, and then like just constantly thinking of like worst case scenarios in terms of like training and racing. And her piece, to open it up, it starts giving like general information about anxiety, and then like personal, or not personal, but eating, like how anxiety shows up in runners, like with eating disorders, or like, and what the research says about that, or like how anxiety can cause GI issues in runners and stuff like that. And then it gets into the more specific details about each way it can show up in runners. And then the biggest part about the service stories that we do, that I work on, we always try to give runners ways to figure out how to resolve these issues that we're bringing up in the piece. And so at the bottom, there's 3 different ways that you can address these symptoms. So that was a more recent piece that did really well for us. Another one that did well was how to switch up your training for better performance. Performance-based stories just always do well. And again, pointing out like certain things that might hinder your performance, and then like how to address those things. So yeah, those are 2. And then for the bicycling side, this story actually hasn't been published yet, but it's in the works right now. So how to nail down the perfect like cycling cadence for your performance. And yeah, those are 3 examples.
Those are great. Thank you both for sharing those, because I think it's so helpful to have like the concrete examples to kind of think about and look at. So as freelancers, we write up our pitches, we shoot off the emails, and it kind of lots of times feels like, right, it's going into this black hole. Like, where is someone reading this? Is there anything happening with this? And I'm curious, you've both talked about like what to actually include in the specific pitch, right? Like the story idea, including some reporting, like the why now, why is this important, and why are you the person to report on this? But I'm curious, like more of like the little things that someone can do to catch your attention. Like, what should we be writing in our subject lines? Is there a good day of the week or time of the month to pitch? Because I'm assuming you all have like story meetings at certain times of the month. Yeah, like just curious, like on that kind of granular level, what else folks can do to kind of stand out for you?
That's a great question, Christine. Well, first, I want to say I totally empathize with how hard it is to get an editor's attention these days. I definitely hear this. I have a lot of friends who are freelancers, of course, and it's like I feel like it's just going out into the ether. And like I just want to say first that like I know how hard this is, and I just want everyone to feel like the effort is worth it. Like if you believe in your story and it's a good story, it may not be a fit for one publication, but I think, don't give up on yourself just because you don't hear back one time. So I just want to start on a note of like encouragement here. But I think for me, I of course mentioned like make it clear in your email subject line that what you have as a pitch for me. So even just saying pitch, and then I want to see a headline. I really like seeing a headline even in the subject line, because that's going to catch my eye more than just a very broad topic, for example. I think just remembering that we're human too. So if you can open in a way that shows me a little bit of your personality, whether it's just being warm, friendly, like I'm also a Midwesterner. It's so nice to see another Iowa girl in media or whatever. Just like we're just as human as you are. And if you can make me feel like you're just a friendly person that wants to get to know me, like that definitely goes a long way. It's, I know it's a lot of the time all business, but I think like we all tend to gravitate towards freelancers who we really enjoy working with. And I think seeing some of your person, like make me laugh, make me like just see that you're a person who, has a personality and wants to get to know me. I think that goes a long way. I would say in terms of when to pitch, we're typically figuring out, we have a cadence of like daily stories, but also everyone has monthly lineups that they put together. And on our end, typically by mid-month, so say like by February 14th, we're thinking about March in terms of monthly lineups. So if you want to make it a story into March, definitely try to pitch a month out at least. That's not to say that, if you pitch it early in March, it won't be accepted. It might just be published later, but that's just a time that I know my editors are really on the lookout for ideas and fleshing out their lineups for the month. In terms of timing, I think you have a higher chance of catching my attention in the morning. That's when I'm really doing a thorough scan of my inbox to make sure I haven't missed anything. So I think if you can schedule it to hit my inbox early in the morning, or that, sending it the night before so it's in my inbox the next day, there's just a higher chance that I'll be responding more at that point, because as the day goes on, editors nowadays aren't just sitting at their desk and editing. I'm in meetings all day, or I'm working with my team, or we're in kickoff calls or whatever. So it's really in the morning that like I'm scanning my inbox for those things. I would say always pitch to my inbox. I do have people reach out on Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn, and I tend not to respond there just because I think LinkedIn, it's a great place to connect. I wouldn't say it's a great place for me personally to pitch. When it comes to Twitter or Instagram, I just try to keep those more personal, and it's a space for me to not think about as work as much, even though I'm always on. So I appreciate, someone finding my email and connecting with me there. And I would say my last piece of advice is in terms of like follow-up. I tend to try, like if a pitch really catches my eye, I try to respond within the week that it was sent to me. At least, even if I'm not like saying we're going to move forward with this, like I'm really interested. I have a few questions, like just getting the conversation going. I try to respond within the week. Definitely, if you haven't heard back in a couple weeks, feel free to follow up, nudge me. I definitely have no problems with that. I think if you don't get a response after a couple weeks, after the first follow-up, it's safe to assume that we passed on it and we just got an influx of many pitches and we can't respond to every single one of them. And I know that's not the greatest thing to hear sometimes, but I do want to say that like we get pitches all day, every day, and like I would love to respond to every single one of them. And I do my best to get back to even if I'm not moving forward with a pitch, like if it caught my eye or I really appreciated them reaching out, I at least try to respond and acknowledge that. Sometimes we can't get to all of them, but I don't want that to be discouraging. I think if you really want to work for a certain brand or you want a byline at a certain brand, keep trying, make sure you're reaching out to the right editor, and you never know when it'll catch your eye the next time.
That is super helpful information to know. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Monique, what about for you?
One point that I didn't get to bring up earlier that I definitely wanted to bring up in terms of researching and pitching before you pitch, unfortunately, fortunately, I don't want to make it seem like a paywall is a bad thing. Runner's World and bicycling are behind a paywall. So unless you are a member, you're not going to be able to read the content on the site. I think like you might get the 3 free articles a month, but that in terms of like freelancing and trying to figure out what it is that they already have covered, you like if you really, really want to be a freelancer for Runner's World or bicycling, it's worth being a member and already knowing what we've produced. And so before you pitch an idea, just make sure that we haven't covered it already. So a lot of people will use the search tool on the website, but my favorite way to find out if we've covered the topic or not is to do a site search in Google. So literally type the word site and then colon and then runnersworld.com and then whatever your keyword phrases. And any article that has those words in it will come up, and read it and see, because I have had to pass up on pitches because we've already covered it. And so one thing that I would agree that would get my attention is having the headline in the subject line, or just saying like Runner's World pitch, because or bicycling pitch, because my inbox is filled with a lot of different like just PR spam emails. And then like pitching early Monday mornings would be nice, because we have a morning meeting or a weekly meeting on Tuesdays. So if you get it right first thing on Monday, it would be easier for me to find versus sending it at the end of the day on Friday or even on Sunday, because I just kind of like, if it doesn't have a catchy, or if it doesn't apply, I let it fly and it goes to the trash. So I can, I'm sorry. So I can get through it, because sometimes I'll come back to, 50 emails and I can't find what I need. And then so on, we pitch a month in advance. So if you want to get me a pitch before our monthly meeting, I say do it a week in advance. It is like clockwork. The first week of the month, we are guaranteed to have a pitch session, unless there's a holiday at the beginning of the week. Then it might get pushed to the second week, but it is like clockwork, and we're always, forward thinking. What else? I feel like that's about it.
I wanted to ask, I want to make sure we leave enough time, but there's just like a couple of just quick questions I wanted to make sure we got into. But when both of you receive pitches from freelancers, are you willing to kind of go back and forth with them to kind of massage the idea, to kind of flesh it out and work through it?
Yeah, I've gotten on calls with people and tried
Mhm.
to like make sure I can flesh out the idea because I always want to see my goal is always to see the story published. So I try to say like, did you see if we had this covered? Did you talk to anybody? I'm willing to work with it. And in the past, I've like actually just I say like even if your idea doesn't get the green light, still try to continue to work with the editor and check in with them because I've gotten so excited and I've connected with freelancers and then the relationship has just fallen through. So
Yeah, I would echo the same thing. I think if I get a pitch where I'm like, this is like a really interesting topic or scope, or maybe one that I hadn't thought about before, but it's not quite the right framing for us as a brand, that's when I like if I can see potential in the story and I'm like, with a few tweaks, we could make it work for self. That's when I'll respond and say, like, hey, I really appreciate this. I really like your thinking here. Um, this type of framing isn't quite what we're looking for, but would you be open to, adding a personal story? Would you be open to making this more of a deeply reported piece? Or are you okay with pulling back the scope and making this shorter and breezier? Like, I think we're definitely open to just like if the idea makes sense and if the idea has potential for our site, I'll definitely reach back out and see, how can we work together on this? And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. I've had freelancers be very honest and like, oh, I really want to stay within the confines of like what I'm thinking here, and then it doesn't work out. But if you're open to kind of tweaking an idea for a brand, because at the end of the day, like it needs to, like we always look for things that are just uniquely self, and like you won't be able to read this quite anywhere else, especially if it's, something that's rooted in, again, commentary or personal experience. So yeah, we're open to it. I would say it's even happened in the last few weeks, where our freelancers reached out and had an interesting idea, and we kind of went back and forth. I also have gotten on calls with folks, especially if it's like a bigger story. I like to be on the same page. I've had people send me outlines of like very brief outlines of what they're thinking of before we go all in with the story, because then we can get a better sense of how they're thinking about the structure. But I wouldn't normally ask for that unless I was genuinely interested in the story.
And then for each of your brands, is there a section that's easiest to break into or a type of story that you're more likely to take from a new to you freelancer?
Yeah, I was speaking with Krista, our fitness director, about this yesterday, and she said the words like, I would never like cold assign a feature. Like it's she wouldn't like if she hadn't worked with that writer before, it would be really hard for her to assign like a 3,000 word investigative piece on like something happening in the athletic space. But I think, especially as a new writer, it's so much easier to break into a quick reactionary news format. If you are available to do a quick write-up on something that you have a unique take on, that is something that again, even the humble walk idea, I think is a great example because it is more of a trend focused piece, but it's shorter. So it will be quicker for the freelancer to write and report, but it will also be quicker for us to edit. I don't want to say it feels lower stakes because that seems a little bit negative, but like it, it's like the first time you're working with someone, it'll help. Like there will just be a vibe check. Like, do you like working with us as much as we like working with you? Like, what is the communication like? What is, like getting a feel for the editing process. We have a process where we ask writers to back up their stories with annotated sourcing, and that is sometimes new and it takes getting used to. So it's like, are you okay with that process? Is it something that you want to continue doing when you turn in work for us? So I think when the story is a bit shorter, quicker, just like easier in scope, we're more likely to be like, okay, let's give it a shot. And then if that goes well, I think you can build the relationship from there. It's like, if that's something you want to continue doing, great. If you want to work up and do some meatier pieces, now we already have a feel for your work and what you can do.
That's great.
For us, I do want to make a point to say, like, we have separate teams. So like we have gear, we have features, we have the service team that I am on, we have news. So you do have opportunities to, pitch across the different verticals, but in terms of like for newer um freelancers, I feel like the service team is more is friendlier for a newcomer. Whereas like the gear team, the features team, they are looking for like the gear team, a lot of that work is in-house because we're constantly testing things. The features team, I feel like they do have and look for more seasoned writers. But I can't speak to like if they've ever worked with newbies. But for us, since we are doing a kind of combination of different stories across, performance and improvement in health and fitness and like workouts and like exercise explainers and stuff like that, I feel like we are definitely more willing to work with newcomers, and you just have to like show and prove that you have some degree of knowledge, especially when it gets to deeper explainers on like how to train or do a specific movement. But yeah, I think like if you have a background in fitness, maybe if you're or a personal trainer, or still are a personal trainer, if you are a run coach or a cycling coach, that can kind of give you that 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 advantage to writing with us, and you gotta kind of say that off the bat too.
Great. So I wanted to turn to some questions from the audience. And so just a reminder, if you do have questions, please pop them in the Q&A box and I'll go through those as asking Alisa and Monique. Other quick thing is I know that folks shared both of the editors' email addresses in the chat, so you might need to scroll up and find that contact information if you haven't taken note of it already. So Alisa, just two quick questions for you. What is the age demographic of Self?
Ooh, that's a great question. It kind of depends on where we're reaching our audience. So I would say right now, the Self reader is between like early 20s to their 40s, which is kind of wide. I would say like our True Blue reader is like young parent and maybe their early to mid 30s. I would say that like our newsletter audience, for example, if we have a dedicated newsletter we send out, tends to skew older, whereas our Instagram or social audience maybe skews a little bit younger. So I think it depends, but anywhere in that 20s to 40s range. Although I don't think we always stick to that demographic to a T. Like we have definitely explored doing, stories that speak to an older audience. We've talked about like, we've done packages around like back to school and college students. So I think like if it can fit into our core verticals and like our brand values, we're open. But that is our general scope that we tend to like keep in mind when we're thinking about our reader.
And then do you accept essays, or actually are essays or service reported pieces more likely to be accepted by your publication?
Sure, that's a great question. We're definitely open to both. I would say with essays, one thing to keep in mind is that I tend to like a pre-written essay, you have to be open to the editing process. So if you've already written out, what you think this essay is going to be, and I'm interested in it, I'm going to respond with, are you open to significantly editing this piece? And so that's something I would be prepared for, but we are open to it. I would just say with personal essays, it has to have a servicey element to it, something that our readers can either and sometimes service is just like acknowledgement of something, right? Like whether you're talking about a brutal injury and how it affected your mental health, or you know, like how working with a weight inclusive trainer totally changed your view on fitness. Like those are types of personal stories that we're really interested in. But we want to be able to bring your experience back to our readership. So that's something to keep in mind with personal essays. And then service stories, of course, like that's our entire site is, you know, focused on service journalism. A lot of the service that we do, I would say, is like pitched in-house, but I think if, you know, keeping in mind everything that we've talked about, if you can catch our eye in some unique way with a service story, absolutely, like that's our entire site.
Monique, does Runner's World or Bicycling take personal essays?
Yes. It has to, we take personal essays, but then also like we just also want to be able to service the reader. So if we can find a way to combine your personal essay, and make it like flip it, like have the essay at the top and then flip it and give some advice, we would be more willing to do it. So it's not that we're just going to run with an essay. It has to have that service angle to it.
And then I know you had both mentioned SEO stories. What is an SEO story? You know, kind of if you can kind of define that, and then if someone is interested in pitching an SEO story, like, do you write that in the pitch itself, or, you know, how do you kind of address that issue?
Sure,
Um,
I feel like Monique and I both have a lot of thoughts here. I
yeah.
mean, I think all editors have a lot of thoughts about SEO because it's just been such a foundation for digital media. But essentially, an SEO story is when you search a keyword in Google, SEO stories are what's going to show up on page one when you're in Google, or like high ranking SEO stories. And a lot of these are, you know, when you think of like a basic keywords like how to do a squat, or the best exercises for like the best abs exercises, or why are my muscles sore, like the things that you commonly search in Google and are finding like trying to find answers for, and those articles that show up are SEO stories. They're very, we do them very strategically. We have, you know, programs that will show us like how often certain terms are being searched every month. We typically refresh these stories, especially our like the ones that get the highest number of eyeballs every month. We keep an eye on those to make sure they're up to date and have, you know, recent reporting. You know, if anything's changed or if the brand has changed in any way, we tend to take a breeze through those stories. So that's something to keep in mind with SEO, as well as like if you pitch one of those stories, there's a high chance that it will be updated in the future, and it is subject to change over time. But every brand at this point, like most digital media brands, have an SEO strategy in place. Most editors on my team contribute to SEO in some way, including the fitness vertical. And it's just something that lays the foundation for our site. It's when I think of like service content or explainers, I think of SEO content because most of the time those stories have a very specific keyword attached to them.
Yeah, if I could add, we do a lot of work around SEO stories and search engine optimization. And so one thing that I would suggest, you can use SEMrush. I think they allow you to search a couple of different keywords a month. You can also use Word Tracker that allows you a couple of free searches a month to just kind of see if there's anybody searching for the story idea that you are willing to pitch. Because, you know, as an editor, we have a lot of access to in-house tools, which is a blessing. So we can kind of see what things are happening and where the conversations are moving. But as a freelancer, you might not be able to see that information, and but it's important to know it, because that information is what we kind of use to make decisions on whether or not we're going to go with the story, in addition to what we already know about our readers. So yeah, SEO, we can talk about it for hours. I love it. Just being able to hone in on a particular question, and answering those. And then also when you write your piece, consider the questions that the reader is asking themselves or possibly searching in Google, and use those to write your subheads and to write your piece. That would be my like biggest advice.
That's a great piece of advice. This is a quick one. Do you both accept pitches from non-US based writers? And if so, like, how does that work for payments?
I would say, oh, go ahead, Monique, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I never have, so that's my input on it.
Yeah, I haven't either personally. I would say that I don't see why we wouldn't be open to it. I'm not sure what the payment process would look like. Of course, like I said, we have a great director of editorial operations who would be able to help with that. But I just haven't personally worked with anyone in that capacity.
And then for self, how does the likelihood of assigning a bigger piece to a new to you writer change if that writer has significant clips with other publications, assuming that the idea is a fit and something you're interested in?
That's a great question. So it definitely makes a difference. I will say, like, I have assigned bigger pieces to new to me writers. Christine, you were one of them. So that's a great example. But I think, if I can see that someone is really like an expert in their beat, that goes a long way. Like if you have extensive clips within the fitness and sports space, or even like a niche within that, like if you are in women's sports, or you are like you specialize in fitness SEO, like if I can see that through your clips, if I can see, honestly, it does help to see that you've written for publications that we would consider our competitors, or our sister publications. That goes a long way, because that shows to me that you've worked for a brand at a similar level, or at a similar capacity. So like maybe you haven't worked for self, but you have for other brands. And if I can see that clearly on a website, you're showing me a portfolio that has work that I think is really great. We're definitely open to it. I still don't think I would go the highest level of like what we would assign or pay to a brand new writer, but some of those like mid-tier featurey type pieces, like I think I would definitely be open to it if I could see that the writer was like the absolute person to be writing that story.
Monique, you had mentioned, right, advising folks to look through your website, right, to see if a story is run before. I'm curious, how long between stories, right? Like if something ran on the site, a similar story ran on the site, say like a year or two ago, like is that long enough? Or I know it's probably not any like specific calculus you're doing, but just a sense of like what's long, like how far since then?
So there really is no method of the madness. But if you, what I would say is if it has run within a year or two, they'll probably suggest updating it before they suggest pitching it out or like doing another angle on it. The stories back from 2016, probably depending on how the research has gone, depending on just like if our format has changed, or if like the science is just different, we might like pitch it out. We might like go with a pitch. So try to look for, I guess if there was advice I would give, try to look for something that might be like the science has changed on the topic. And if you see that we've covered it and you can provide a different angle, then I would say to go with that story versus a story that the science really hasn't changed and there's not really much that you can add. And if it is something that we already have, feel free to link to it and then say like, this is why I think we should go with it. Like, here's what I can add to it. So I can speak to that, because if we've gone through it, a lot of pitches just get shut down right as soon as I open my mouth.
That's super helpful. I know we are right at 1:15, so I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. And again, thank you, Monique. Thank you, Alisa, for being here. This has been super helpful. And having worked with both of these brands, I mean, they're great brands to work with. If you guys have ideas, definitely shoot your shot, right? You never know unless you pitch. And so, yeah, just want to remind folks to sign up for IIJ's newsletter. You'll get the recording of this webinar. There's also a conference coming up, right, Catherine? I don't remember the details off the top of my head.
Yes, thank you so much, Christine. You moderated the heck out of that panel, and what a wonderful prepared set of speakers. I always love it when folks come with specific examples and compassion and openness and encouragement, and you two really delivered. So thank you so much, Christine, Alisa, and Monique. Yes, we would love to stay connected with everyone here. If you sign up for the IIJ newsletter, you will receive the recording of this call on Tuesday when it goes out. We also try to write up a little pitch guide that takes a little longer, but that's a kind of printed reminder of all the wisdom that was shared today. And we have a conference with 3 panels full of editors and I think 8 pre-recorded Q&As. Oh, we will also try to do a Q&A with Greg from Front Office Sports and send that out to everyone who registered for this webinar, just because I know he was really sorry not to be here. He said he loves panels and he really was hoping to connect with Alisa, Monique, and Christine. So look out for that as well. And the conference is, everything we do is available at the IIJ.com. So only $89 for 2 full days of learning and a ton of resources for pitching better and thriving and surviving and being emotionally and financially sustainable as a freelancer. So thank you again, everyone, for being here. I'm sorry to keep you a couple minutes late. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your Super Bowl parties and best of your careers and everything to everyone.